James Spurgeon is the grandfather of Charles Spurgeon, the famed British pastor known as the Prince of Preachers. James was also a pastor, and one equally committed to not elevating the preacher above the message. It had been announced on one occasion that the younger Spurgeon, who was already widely known in that day, was going to be preaching at a church in Suffolk, and his grandfather was there. But Charles Spurgeon, the younger Spurgeon, was late in arriving, and so his grandfather started the service, and he even started the sermon because Charles wasn't there yet, and so he chose as his text Ephesians chapter 2, "For by grace you have been saved." And he was into it a little while when all of a sudden a disturbance at the back door made it evident that the younger, prestigious Spurgeon had arrived. And so in the middle of his sermon, the elder Spurgeon looked at the congregation and he said, "Here comes my grandson. He can preach the gospel better than I can." But then in mid-sentence, he turned and looked at his grandson who was being escorted down the aisle and said, "But you can't preach a better gospel, can you, Charles?" Beloved, this is what we have to get. Listen to this. Come in here real close. The gospel does not increase in effectiveness and quality depending upon the giftedness of the preacher. Let me say it again. The gospel does not increase in effectiveness and quality depending upon the giftedness of the preacher. This is why the message of the cross must be featured and remain constant. One preacher may be able to preach better than another, but he will never be able to preach a better gospel. And you know what the ultimate tragedy is of not making sure that that message features? The ultimate tragedy is where people put their faith. That's what verse 5 is talking about. Doing all of this, Paul said, so that your faith might not be in the wisdom of a man, but it might be in the power of God. Because you see, people are going to have a tendency to put their faith in whatever features in the preaching event. And this can come from an audience. It can come from a preacher. We as preachers can do things that cause other things besides the message to rise above the message. And that's what we put forward to feature before the people. And that will lure the faith of many to be in a place that won't last. But it can also happen with congregations who impress that upon preachers, and then their expectations and what they value, they begin to elevate things above the message of the cross as well, and consequently that's what they put their confidence in. That is the tragedy of not yielding ourselves in our weakness to the message of the cross and letting it be featured.